Hi people, it's Archivist here, and today I'm going to be reviewing Realism Ground War mode. And the events that led to me playing Realism Ground War mode are a little bit interesting, to put it politely to myself, where I came on at the weekend, I looked at the modes, I saw there was some kind of Valentine's theme going on, but I thought that these were a bunch of unique gimmick modes, and I saw that there was just Realism Ground War listed. And I jumped to the conclusion rather hastily that regular Ground War had been removed. And as a result, I ended up just playing Realism Ground War all weekend, and then at the end of it ranting about the fact I'd been forced to play it by taking out the regular Ground War mode, only to realise they had simply renamed Ground War Friends with Benefits, and it's the exact same mode. So that's how I ended up playing it, and although that was a bit frustrating and certainly made me look like a bit of an idiot, on the other hand, it did lead to me playing a game mode that, you know what, I probably wouldn't have otherwise played. And so I can now review and talk about Realism Ground War. And also it gives me a bit of an excuse just to talk about the mode in general, my updated feelings on it, because if you've been watching my Modern Warfare videos pretty much since the beginning, you'll know that Ground War is definitely my favourite mode. So how do I feel about this realistic alternative? Well, first of all, the real way in which it is realistic is that you don't have a heads-up display. So you can't see how much ammo you have, how many grenades you have. You can't easily see the kill streaks you have. You do see some symbols, but it's not quite the same thing. Your minimap is disabled by default, but it does appear in the event of like a personal radar, UAV, advanced radar, etc. So it's very minimal. It's probably more important to say it's not completely gone. Things like the countdown at the start of a match, if you walk up to an ammo crate, you'll still see some prompts in cases such as that. I think there are certain times where they probably should have put prompts in but forgot. One good example would be if you walk up to a care package that you've just called in, normally it would say hold square to unlock the box, but it doesn't do it. But if you hold square, you can still do that. But I think it's useful to have that prompt there just so you know that you're actually targeting the box. There was one time initially where I was looking just above where I think I needed to look, and I was holding down square, and I just assumed that I was opening some other player's care package that had just fallen nearby, and someone else took it, and I was like, oh no, I just wasn't looking directly at the center, which is where you need to roughly look in order to unlock a care package. One area where it's not a bad thing, but it certainly keeps things interesting for me, would be in the ammo reserves. So if you've been playing the game for a while and you're starting to get familiar with a particular weapon, you will start to get used to how much you can fire before you need to reload, and this mode sort of tests your ability to predict that, because you don't see how much is left in your clip, your magazine, whatever. And so that is manageable and kind of an interesting aspect to the realism mode. But I think where it gets a bit tricky is where you can't see your reserves either, so you can't see how much ammo you have left. So you don't know if you should have to prioritize getting more ammo until you go to press square and you can't actually reload. So that can be a bit blinding. And also, is that actually realistic? Because in real life, you just say, oh, how much ammo do I have? You look at your bandolier, oh, that's how much I have. So it's not like in real life you can't see or know how much ammo you have. It's just that because of the nature of the game and how we interact with it, it just makes it blind. So that's a bit tricky, but I can see why having that persistently on the screen would sort of ruin the whole point of this. So I get why it's done, and I'm not saying it should be on there, but it's just something that I suppose makes it a bit trickier than I feel like it needs to be. The biggest benefit is definitely just a level of immersion, and I've always talked about how amazing the graphics are in this game, even on consoles like PS4 Pro, absolutely amazing. And not having the HUD in the way most of the time definitely allows you to appreciate the raw visuals a little bit more, and it can keep you sort of more focused on just what's around you and what you can see. So another example of like the HUD being disabled would be on enemy nameplates. So naturally, if you aim at someone or they're just about in your field of view and they're an enemy player, you'll get the little red name above their head, and you'll know to shoot them because of that. And not only does it act as an indicator, but it's also a little bit of an assist, because say they are actually hiding in a bush or they're just around a corner and you wouldn't naturally have been able to see them, the nameplate sort of gives them away. So camouflage and how you look and where you're putting yourself plays into this a little bit more. And I found myself just really staring at certain locations, looking for small signs of movement, because sometimes I'd like shoot a dead body because I just think, oh, it could be someone prone, but it would turn out to be a dead body. And I just gave myself away, at least in terms of noise. So that is quite an interesting dynamic, and it also becomes a tiny bit harder to know you've killed someone, because in the regular mode you get a massive like plus 100 or whatever points come up when you shoot someone. Here you have to listen out for the little sound cue, and also if you have, what is it, the perk quick fix? I think it might be. It's the perk where when you kill someone you get a little bit of a health regen boost. That can be quite useful because then you can see this little white, I don't know what you'd call it, white hue around the screen when you kill someone, so that can be quite good if maybe the sound's down a bit but you still want to be confident you've actually killed someone. And I found myself using quick fix because of that, but also I've realized quick fix is actually quite a good perk, especially if you have like enemies coming around a corner in quick succession and you take the first one out but he got a shot off on you, and then normally someone else would come around and they'd finish you off, but if your health regenerates quicker you can then take the other person out. But hey, look, that's a specific perk discussion and not for this video. So yeah, the lack of nameplates and the lack of clear, obvious recognition you've killed someone is also quite interesting. So it forces you to rely on your senses a little bit more. I've thought that the concepts of realism are really just absolutely fine in a concentrated mode like this. And I feel as if I'm praising this for a lot of the reasons I despise aspects of the main game. I still, in the regular game modes, don't like the fact that you don't ping on the radar when you fire with an unsuppressed weapon, because of the fact that if you do want that experience where you have to rely on your senses a little bit more, you can just play this mode, right? This is what this mode is for. So I feel as if they took steps in the regular mode to move towards this when they didn't have to, because they have this mode. They've already got a split in terms of that. So yeah, I like this mode, but I'm glad it's not the whole game. Like, I think that's a fair thing to say, is a lot of people may enjoy realism modes, ground war or otherwise, but how many people would say, and that's how I want the game to play all the time, because it's an immersive experience, and it's fun, you know, for a little bit to enjoy it, but over time, I think you start to want to go back to the old ways just so you have more visual information to work with. But I think, interestingly, the thing about the nameplates I actually quite liked. I felt as if I wasn't getting killed from a distance quite as much by snipers. Does still happen, of course, quite a lot, but not quite as much as in the regular mode, interestingly. And I wonder if that's just because I was harder to see, so it was trickier for them to see me from a long distance away. What else is there? I suppose there are still some of the pitfalls of regular ground war, like on this quarry map there's this frustrating aspect that's been around since the dawn of time. I can't believe they still haven't made this impossible, but you can take a tank up to the top ridge and just fire down from a distance, and it's really hard to deal with because they've got the high ground, they're in this massive armoured body. And it's got to the point where every time I play the quarry map now, I always have cruise missile as one of my kill streaks. And when I have that, if I've got my cruise missile available, I will often target the ridge to take out the tank. If I can't see anyone, then I won't leave it too long, but that's definitely something that's always on my mind. Equally, you can use cluster strike or precision airstrike or AC-130 if you've got it, but I found that the cruise missile, when you target behind the tank, is the most surefire way to know that that thing is out of commission for good. And it's also nice before you launch the cruise missile to do a quick check on the ground to see if it's there, because it's not always easy to see tanks from a cruise missile point of view. I almost wonder if that was intentional so it wasn't too easy to target them. Like, I'm really curious why they don't always have the red diamond around them, whereas you do get that for all players. Well, I think unless they're using cold-blooded or whatever. So that's that's just a tip, I think, around that. But also the fact that realism doesn't really get rid of any of the biggest problems with ground war. Before Season 2, I was beginning to notice that the exploit on many of the maps where you basically get under the geometry and you can see outside of it, and you can fire out of it, but no one can fire at you, was becoming increasingly common. I was seeing it in a lot of maps. I think the harbour map was probably where I was seeing it the most, but I was seeing it on pretty much all the maps. in the game. And it's also annoying if your teammate does it and you accidentally spawn on them and then you're underground and you're like, I don't want to be a scumbag and use this. Like the moment I start using this, I'm just as bad as the guy who got down here, so I want to get out, so I have to kill myself to get out of that. And I don't know if they fixed that in Season 2, but if that's something that's still there, that really needs to be addressed, because it's crazy how long that's been around, that people have been able to get under the map and just fire, and then they can get a tactical nuke because no one can kill them, especially if they position themselves in an area that loads of people will go past. And it's bad that Infinity Ward have that instill, but it's also like, I can't believe people do that. Like, no one's going to respect you for winning in that, so it's purely a troll move in my opinion. No one's going to look at you doing that and think, wow, there's a good player. No, it's just someone who obviously isn't very good and has to resort to that, or they are good and they're just doing anything possible to win. There's a lot of people who might choose to do that, or you do just spawn on them in there and you're like, well, maybe I'll take advantage of this situation. I don't know. So realism isn't necessarily going to help deal with circumstances like that, but I think the number one thing, again, that I enjoy about it is the extra immersion. I also like how it forces you to rely on your knowledge of the game rather than a lot of the prompts, and I would never recommend Realism Ground War as your first port of call when you get this game. That would be crazy to go straight to this because you haven't learned how the game quite works yet. So it's definitely something to test yourself on if you've been playing the game for a bit already. You know what the button prompts are, you know how much ammo is in the clip of your weapon, you've got a feel for it, so you've already sort of tuned your senses. But if you just jumped into this, you would definitely not be in a great place. You wouldn't really know what you were doing, and things like care packages, you just wouldn't know what to do with them because you wouldn't know to hold square unless someone told you, I guess. And the nameplate thing is also pretty cool, but there is a negative to it, and you might see it in the footage if I leave it in, but when you're in a Wilson, for example, you can't see your friendly nameplates either, so you can't see the blue or green nameplates above allies, so you can't actually distinguish friend from foe very easily. And I actually didn't know for a bit if they were on my side, so I kept shooting at them, and then after a while I realised they're not dying, they're probably on my team, okay, time to move on. But because you can't easily distinguish, you end up just shooting people anyway, because why take the risk of not? That makes sense. So this mode, I think, is worth a try. It might not, like me, it might not be your new definitive way to play the game, but I think it is not a bad way to experience Modern Warfare for sure. And I wouldn't call it a super hardcore mode or anything like that. Don't be put off by the fact you think this is going to be massively harder. Everyone's got the same handicap, so everyone's in the same boat. In fact, I noticed fewer players who seem to be incredibly good in this mode, so it might actually be slightly easier. I don't know how that's happened, but it seems to be the case. So, as always, people, thanks very much for watching and see you next time.